On today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, the race for the top spot in the Atlantic Division thickens.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into another episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, your daily podcast on the NHL. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. On today's episode of Locked On NHL, we'll discuss a couple of big future pieces signing their ELCs with their respective teams. We'll talk about Ryan Leonard and Gabe Perreault signing with Washington and New York, respectively. We'll hear from John Chick. We'll hear from Dan Holme as well, their thoughts on both signings. We'll also take a look at the fight for the top spot in the Atlantic Division. It's getting tight in the Atlantic, so we'll take a look at where things stand right now. And we'll take a look at a key piece for the future of the Philadelphia Flyers, who is so hot he cooled down the sun. Matvei Michkov is on a heater. Is it because there's been a coaching change in Philly? We'll discuss on today's episode. My name is Seth Topal, host of Locked On Wild, joined by JD Young of Locked On Sharks. And JD, before we look at the current, we're going to take a look at the future, because as we dive into the thick of the NCAA tournament, anytime a team gets eliminated, we immediately go to contract watch. We immediately look to see which players are going to sign their ELCs, which players are going to jump to the NHL ranks to try to help the team that controls their rights. And we had a couple of players that have made the leap, most notably here over the last couple of days. And obviously Washington fans and New York Rangers fans pretty happy with the news that both Ryan Leonard and Gabe Perreault have signed their ELCs. And we'll hop in immediately to help out their respective teams. We are going to hear from both John Chick and Dan Holme to get their thoughts in both cases on the players that have signed. And so, why don't we start with Ryan Leonard? Obviously, the Washington Capitals in the top spot by a large margin in the Eastern Conference. So they're in the midst of a fantastic season, but you can never have enough youth. You can never have enough youth in the system. And so a prospect in Leonard who's pretty highly touted, getting his journey started is a great step in the right direction. So let's hear from Dan on Ryan Leonard signing his ELC.
The moment that we've all been waiting for is here. The Capitals sign Ryan Leonard to a 3-year entry-level contract. Hi, this is Dan Holme of Locked On Capitals. Well, if you want a reason to be hyped, this is it. The 30-goal scorer this year for Boston College signs a 3-year entry-level contract with the Capitals with an AAV of $950,000. The good news is it does appear that he will be in the lineup versus the Bruins, and this couldn't have happened at a better time, as the Capitals have struggled in the last 3 games. Maybe a youthful infusion in the form of Ryan Leonard could be exactly what the doctor ordered. 30 goals, I think the Capitals would be on board for that. Just taking a team that's already great and taking it to the next level. I'll have much more on this for you later on Locked On Capitals, your team every day.
Thank you, Dan. And for more on Ryan Leonard, make sure you check out Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. And I like what Dan said there, JD, because twofold. Obviously, it's a Capitals roster that has some age on the roster. Obviously, Alex
Yep.
Ovechkin is way up there. He is fighting father time on a daily basis to
He's beating father time right now, but yeah,
he's
father time's a little woozy.
He has not put in his 2 weeks notice yet with father
Nope.
time. But you know, some youth to kind of add into this roster. But the thing that I like the most is you got a guy in Ryan Leonard who obviously has a ton of skill. He has a great shot. He's going to be able to, I think, help this team out right away. There's not going to be any pressure on him to do so because you can slot him in. I equate this to the Dallas Stars when they have put in players like Wyatt Johnston, Logan Stankoven. They've got so much depth on their roster as it is right now that you can put a Ryan Leonard in your lineup and just let him do his thing. It's not going to be, he's not going to be expected to come in and be like a goal every other game type player. They just want to get a little energy in that lineup and just see how things play out from there.
Yeah, no, and Ryan Leonard is the perfect guy for that. I've watched a lot of Ryan Leonard because, of course, Will Smith famously also went to Boston College. All three of these guys, Gabe Perreault, Will Smith, and Ryan Leonard, all on a line together at Boston College, known as the freshman line. And then they played for Team USA and World Juniors, and they were known as the BC line then. But Ryan Leonard is a bull in a china shop. And he is going to fit in perfectly for what the Caps want to do. Yes, he has skilled 30 goals this season. Most likely going to win the Hobey Baker as the best player in college hockey this year. At least that's where my money would go. But he's one, right? There's no pressure because the Caps are like this close to wrapping everything up, so they can kind of ease him into it. And it's not like you're dropping him right into the middle of a playoff race where you got to perform right now. They can kind of get his feet wet before the playoffs actually start. But two, like you said, you can play him anywhere. If you want to play him, as like a super awesome third liner right now, where you just go out and you just cause chaos, and then you can maybe potentially have the best third line in the entire NHL. If you want to put him on the second line, like whatever you want to do with Ryan Leonard, he's going to be able to do that for you. And I think, again, that energy and just the style that he plays with an edge. He plays with some snarl, and you need that during the playoff time. And I think he's going to be a huge, huge boost for this Caps team, who has a legitimate chance to win the Stanley Cup this year, especially in such a wide open East. And we're going to talk about the rest of the Eastern Conference here in a little bit. But I think this is a perfect signing for the Caps right now. So.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because I'm looking at what the Capitals have based off daily face-off, and their second line, you've got Alex Ovechkin, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Anthony Beauvillier. Maybe you give Leonard some looks with Ovechkin and Dubois.
Leonard, go get puck. Go get puck and give it to Ovechkin. Like that was his role with the BC line, or the freshman line. Go get puck and get it to Will Smith, and let Will Smith create there. That's what he could definitely do that. So the other guy, Gabe Perreault, who's a little bit different player, kind of more. His game is definitely more subtle. He also signed, and I know our friend John over at Locked On Rangers. Not as exciting as our friend Dan. So let's hear what John had to say.
Gabe Perreault is signing his 3-year entry-level contract with the New York Rangers. Definitely some mixed feelings among the Ranger fan base, myself included, on this situation. To begin with, I have some reservations just due to the fact that this would burn a year of his entry-level contract, or that's certainly my understanding of the situation. Then you've also got the fact that the Rangers have made this kind of mistake in the past. We don't have any guarantee that he's going to start with the Rangers, but we've seen a lot of Ranger prospects, guys that were drafted high, skip the AHL entirely, and it often has not led to good things, and I don't want to see the Rangers repeat that mistake with Gabe Perreault. There's also the fact that Peter Laviolette might be on his last legs with the Rangers, and that being the case, I don't know how much he's going to frankly care about developing Gabe Perreault. And then there's the fact that, just look at the Rangers this year. That locker room has taken a turn for the worse this season. I don't think anybody can deny that. And throwing a 19-year-old right into the middle of that, I don't know that that's the best thing either. But with that said, I'm human. If Gabe Perreault is out there against the Wild on Wednesday night, I'm certainly not going to look away. I'm excited to see what the kid can do. So there's some good aspects to this. There's some not so good aspects, but we're going to break it down on the next episode of Locked On New York Rangers. Do not miss it.
So one, yes, it burns the first year of your ELC. That is normal for all these high-end prospects, like NCAA guys. That's just part of the game. You know, your guy Z Williams going to burn his first year. Matty Beniers, like all these guys, that is just part of the game of signing these high-end prospects. Two, he's not eligible to play in the AHL right now, especially since he signed his ELC. But that doesn't mean he can't play in the AHL next year. You see this a lot. Like even the Sharks are doing this right now. They just signed their guy Cam Lund, burned his ELC. I fully expect him to start in the AHL next year and work his way up. But you see this all the time, especially for a team like the Rangers, who are in the middle of a playoff battle and need a spark. And Gabe Perreault is a guy who can kind of come in. He's a solid playmaker. He's a solid scorer. He's not as flashy as a guy like Ryan Leonard, who's, again, that bull in the china shop. But he also skating. He's a pretty solid skater as well. Like, Gabe Perreault is going to come in and I think fit in and whatever you need him to do, I think he can do. But I don't think he's going to have the same impact that Ryan Leonard does right away. So, but yeah, I think it's just part of the game with having to sign these guys is you just kind of eat that first year. And that way they can get to that first real contract sooner rather than later.
Well, and what it does, and I'm a huge advocate of this in the ELC terms, it gives them a little bit of a sample size right before the off season. So it gives you that like check where you're at based off of NHL competition to where you can say, okay, here's what I need to work on over it plots out the entire rest of your off season. If you need to bulk up a little bit to kind of be able to withstand what the NHL game brings.
Yes, he'll need to bulk up a little bit.
Yeah,
That's every kid coming out of college. Yes.
Every chance you get to go through the McDonald's drive-through, please do so. But it gives you a chance to see where you stack up. I do agree with a lot of the stuff that John said about just the current state of this Rangers team. But it's a great opportunity for Perreault to get into the lineup, to get out on the ice against NHLers. Because that's, you see that at every level, like from the high school level to college. It's like, okay, now pretty much all of these guys have representative talent that are playing at the college level. Then you go from the college to the minor league hockey level, and it ratchets up one more time. You go from minor league hockey to the NHL, complete different animal. It's like these guys are all like best players from their city, best players from their graduating class. Every single one of them is just an animal out there. So it's going to give him some good experience. And I think it's a great way to just set up the off season and give him a plan of what he needs to do to be ready for next year.
And the Rangers are going to have a massive offseason this year, offseason anyway. So I think, though, like getting Gabe Perreault just under contract and kind of getting him in the building. And then, again, if you need to send him to the AHL for a little bit to start the season and then bring him up or however you want to develop him, we'll see. It'll be interesting because, again, like the Rangers in development with some of their high-end guys, it's been a little iffy with you look at Capocacco, who's not even with a franchise anymore. Lafreniere, who's never kind of really been the guy that they expected him to be. You wonder if they can learn from their past mistakes.
Well, and you see that trade-off with teams that are in it to win it now is the youth side, the development side takes a full back seat. So we'll see, but Perreault is definitely going to need to get some level of NHL experience this year, so he knows what it's like to play against Cam Fowler. That's just part of the deal.
That's the mountain we're all climbing, brother.
Yeah, that's what we're all striving for. We are going to take a full deep dive into the Eastern Conference because it's tightening up. The clamps are starting to get tightened, and playoff spots are starting to be more crystal clear. So we'll take a look at the East. We'll take a look at the top three in both, as well as the wild card picture. That is all coming up On today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, we are your team each and every day. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it is easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. I learned recently that I was paying for a Nintendo Switch subscription that I have not used in probably 4 years. But it was a yearly renewal, so I didn't catch it. But Monarch Money was able to flag it down and say, "Hey, are you using this?" So I took that money and I was able to turn it into a small investment that is hopefully going to pay off down the road. That's just a sliver of what Monarch Money offers. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Welcome back to today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. Once again, we are your daily podcast on the NHL. We are your team each and every day as well. Seth Topal and JD Young hanging out here, and time now to dive into the Eastern Conference. And JD, we've seen not a ton of movement from the top three in either side, although very tight in the Atlantic. Very tight at the top of the Atlantic. The big prize here,
shuffling of the chairs, but yes,
yeah.
It's been, yeah.
The big prize here is the wild card spot, because we're now starting to see a little bit of, they say when you put oil and water together, that sometimes it takes a little while for them to kind of separate. We're starting to see that with the teams that are just falling out of the picture. The Boston Bruins have lost 8 in a row, so that takes care of that. Philly, pretty well, 13 points out at this point. They're out of it. Pittsburgh, despite their efforts ish, they're out of it. The New York Islanders have lost 5 games in a row.
They're done.
They're yeah. The Detroit Red Wings, I think 10 points with single-digit games to play is a tall order.
Put the fork in them.
So at this point, it's down to basically, you got the Montreal Canadiens, who have that second wild card spot right now. You got the New York Rangers, and you've got the Columbus Blue Jackets. Are those truly the remaining 3, the last 3 still standing for that second wild card spot?
I guess it is. And I feel bad because I feel like ever since we did a whole segment on Columbus, if they could catch the Devils,
they torpedoed.
They just, they plopped hard from that moment on. They just plopped. But yeah, it's these 3 teams, and every night you see, the Rangers had it for a little bit over the weekend after they beat down the Sharks. Then Montreal's come back. It's very night to night with this, and you wonder now. Columbus has gotten some of their pieces back. Monahan's back, Boone Jenner's back. They have started to get some pieces back. So and they have games in hand, which is a big part of it. So Columbus they've only played 72 games. The Rangers have played 74, and Montreal has played 73. So Columbus, while being back 2 points, does have more bites at the apple here. So I think a lot of fans would like to see Columbus get in just because of the story from the season that they've had. But Montreal, this would be a big step for their rebuild. The Rangers are the team I just don't want to see, because I have no faith that the Rangers are going to be able, not that I think any of these teams are going to be able to upset the Caps, but at least I think the story from the other two would be great. So
The New York Rangers at this point are like when Harry in Dumb and Dumber gets shot in the up in the hotel room, and you just assume at that point that he's gone, he's out of the picture, and then all of a sudden he pops up off the bed and he starts shooting at the bad guy, but he misses every shot. You're like, Harry, you're alive, but you're a horrible shot. So that's what I feel like with this. Head? That's what I feel like.
They shot me in the head?
That's a risk we were willing to take.
Yes.
That's what I feel like with this Rangers team, though, is like we had buried the Rangers early in the season, like buried and gone, and now all of a sudden, like they're in the mix. But here's the key part at this point in the season:
they buried themselves. They traded away like a bunch of their players.
And then they acquired JT Miller, and they're like, we're not out of this yet. The big key at this point in the season, JD, is finding ways to accumulate additional points. Montreal is 4-6 in their last 10 games, but 2 of those losses have been in OT. So technically, they have points in 7 out of their last 10 games.
Yeah.
Whereas the New York Rangers are 4-6. They have points in 5. And the Columbus Blue Jackets are 3-6-1. So 3-7. They have points in 4 of their last 10. So if Montreal, if you can just find a way to get a game to OT because of the way that the point system is structured here in the NHL, that can be the difference between. It's like the Flames from a couple of years ago where they had 16 overtime losses. And you're okay, this is preposterous.
The Sharks a couple of years had 17, yeah. And if you look at the strength, the schedule, because that's a big part of it here. It's just the schedule remaining. The Rangers have the 3rd hardest strength of schedule left. They still have 2 games against the Lightning, a game against the Hurricanes, a game against the Panthers, 1 against your Minnesota Wild, 1 against the Devils, and their easiest opponents left. They play the Flyers and the Islanders. On the flip side, Montreal has the 28th hardest schedule, or the 5th easiest schedule. They play the Canes once, the Leafs once, the Panthers once, and the Sens once, but then they also play the Blackhawks, they play the Preds, they play the Bruins, they play the Flyers, and they play the Red Wings. So there's more potential meat on the bone. So it's going to come down, I think, to Columbus or Montreal, who gets this last spot. I think hopefully here the Rangers can go away. But yeah, I do really quickly on the top of the Atlantic here, because you do have 3 teams all very close here between the Leafs, right, the Lightning, and the Panthers. I know the Panthers, they're going to do the thing, right, where when playoffs get here, everybody's magically going to show up. But it doesn't matter for the Panthers, you think, if they don't have home ice advantage? You just feel like with Tkachuk and with that core, they're going to be okay. Who do you think needs the home ice advantage the most between those 3 teams?
I think if you are looking at this 2-3 matchup, let's just say Toronto hangs on and they end up as the number 1 seed. I think Florida has got to hope to get the 2, because you look at the record, Tampa Bay 27-8-2 at home this year.
It's pretty good.
If you're telling me that Tampa Bay has 1 more home game in that series, I think that's going to make the difference between those 2 teams. So that 2-3 matchup, getting home field in that series could make the difference between who wins and who goes home. Honestly, I think just with where Florida is at, feels like home would do them the most good, considering what. But
if they are playing Tampa, it's a short.
It's basically a home game anyway.
Yeah, it's not that far. It's probably a 1 hour, less than a 1 hour flight between South Florida and Tampa. It's a very, very short flight. So, but I also kind of really trust, until proven otherwise, I just trust the Panthers right now. I assume when Tkachuk gets back, Tkachuk, it sounds like he's starting to get on the ice here soon. I just feel like when he gets back and the whole gang is back together, they'll be fine. But like Tampa's also kind of this, they just keep kind of remorphing themselves into and kind of staying in contention. So yeah, it's gonna be fun the last couple weeks here. So
it's gonna be frantic, to put it mildly. Speaking of frantic, the Philadelphia Flyers have had an eventful last week, and Matvei Michkov just decided that he was going to never stop scoring after everything that has happened. So we'll look at his run and what has precipitated just an absolute heater from the young Flyers prospect. That is coming up as we finish today's episode of Locked On NHL after this.
looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the in-shell variety. I love the here in the crack. Just the plain salt ones are my favorite, but they have no shell variety. They have a ton of different flavors. So no matter what kind of tickles your variety, your fancy, they've got you covered there with all their varieties. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more.
Final segment of today's episode of Locked On NHL. Once again, we are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. Seth Topal and JD Young talking now about the Philadelphia Flyers, who are no longer under the John Tortorella era that came to an end rather abruptly. And you know, it's interesting because the thought was always that Tortorella was going to be the coach to get more out of a young roster, to get more out of this young core. And there have been some notable, I don't want to say spats, because I don't know if that's the right word, but there have been some notable.
John Tortorella not getting along with a player. I am shocked and appalled to hear this.
I, for one, am absolutely shocked that that this has happened. But there have been some notable ones with just about all of the players on the roster, but even Matvei Michkov, who is a highly touted prospect for the Flyers, but you know, there have certainly been some growing pains here in his first year in the NHL. But you look at what he's done recently, going back to the game on the 22nd against the Dallas Stars. He is on a 6-game point streak, but in that span, 11 points in the 6 games.
7 goals. Yeah.
It is a bit of a heater, to say the least. And so, like, we're probably never going to know, but is it as simple as getting a new voice in there and just allowing a young player to kind of do his thing? Is that the key?
I mean, I've always, with the Calder debate, right? I've always kind of had an eye on Michkov. Of course, Macklin celebrating Calder Breedy, et cetera, et cetera. But like it felt a little round peg in a square hole with that mix, right? Because John Tortorella, like, he wants you to play defense, he wants you to play hockey the right way, play a full 200-foot game. If you've ever watched Matvei Michkov, he's known for scoring, and he's really good at that. And I don't know if maybe the fit was right. And it felt like at times they kind of met halfway there, but I still, there was also times where he got benched, like in games. There's times where he was a healthy scratch, right? You need to watch from above, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't think it's a coincidence that, like, as soon as it feels like John Tortorella is about to leave the organization, Matvei Michkov starts putting up just ridiculous numbers for this team. And, it could be a coincidence, but it doesn't feel like it, right? Like it feels like now Michkov is maybe kind of off the chain a little bit. Like, hey, just go do what you're good at and go play hockey and go score goals and do that and be super sick. And we'll figure out like how to kind of round out your 200-foot game. But you don't draft Matvei Michkov to like you draft him to score 40, 50 goals for you for a season. Like in a season. That's what Matvei Michkov does. If you're drafting him to like, shut things down in the defensive zone late in the third period, like you can find other dudes who get that. You don't find guys who are potential 40, 50 goal scorers in Matvei Michkov.
Yeah, you're not asking him to have a strong forecheck when he's out there on the ice. You're like, get to the net as quickly as you can and just put it past the goalie.
Yeah.
And I do find it funny. Like obviously, the correlation here is probably loose at best, but you have two of your highest scoring games, 6-4 and 7-4, in the couple of games since, and then you've got that absolute barn burner against Nashville 2-1. It is, I think
known for their defense.
Yeah, just sieves defensively that turns out can actually defend. I think it is a good reminder that as much as we see some of these old school coaches try to hang on to the old ways, the future of this league more and more is to prioritize skill and skating and speed. And if you don't have those things, and if you try to play a style that is opposite of that, it's harder. It's harder to make that work. Like think about
your ceiling is just like you're capping your own ceiling of what you are as an organization when you do that. And like I don't want to do the comparison, but I'm going to do the comparison a little bit. Like you look at how the Sharks have like Mac was Celebrini, and they're completely different players. Like Celebrini is like a much different full 200-foot player. Now, like you knew that when you're drafting him, but look at how the Sharks have, like you have never seen Mac Celebrini get benched for performances. You've never seen him get benched. Like, has he made mistakes? 100%. Of course, he's an 18-year-old kid playing in the NHL. But they know it is better to work on these mistakes and get through these mistakes now because this kid is the future of your franchise. This is your franchise pillar right here, and you need to put him in a position to succeed. And yes, is Celebrini probably going to be a Crosby Jr. type of player? Yeah, that's the trajectory he's on. Michkov, again, you draft him to score you a bajillion goals because that's what Michkov does. He's going to be a 120 point type of player in the league. And you're just handcuffing him and not letting him play hockey right now. And of course, he's going to make mistakes. But again, you need to nurture the playmaking and what he does. And you try to work on and round out that other stuff. Because if you're trying to make Michkov like a third line forward checking, like it's everybody's going to fail.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my I've watched too many prospects. Yeah, sorry. Anyway.
Well,
Lane Hutz is going to win the Calder, though. Unfortunately, Lane Hutz is really sick too. But
I'm just waiting for Zeev Boyum to win it next year.
When Askarov wins it, it's going to be really tough. So,
yes,
or when Demidov comes over. When Demidov comes over, that's the one right there. When he comes over. Anyway, but I think though this speaks to the future of the league. Like with just all this high end talent, we are going to be looking at some very special players for a very long time. We didn't even mention the two words Connor Bedard here, like who's supposed to be the guy. Like we are in a great time in hockey right now.
And there will inevitably be a course correction, but that's going to be way down the line. Like you always see it where, okay, now we have just this dearth of talent and goalies can't stop a single puck. Like what do we do? Well, now you got to draft for defense. You got to draft for, we got to try to slow these guys down, but that's 80 years down the road. Like we'll just not worry about it. Just continue to score a bajillion goals because that's what everybody wants. That's what I want.
Defense is for nerds. Go score sick goals. Seth.
I want more 11 to 10 games. I want all of them, please.
Oh, just watch some Sharks games. I got you covered there.
Signed a guy whose team that he covers has scored, I think, 8 goals in the last 6 games.
Ugh.
Yeah, fun.
Kaprizov's coming back
Hilarious.
soon, buddy. Kaprizov's coming back soon.
Not soon enough.
Let's
Well,
go.
That's what we got for you for today's show. A big thank you once again for tuning in to Locked On NHL, making us your first listen each and every day. Make sure before you head out for the day that you hit subscribe on YouTube and turn notifications on so you never miss out on a new episode throughout the week. You can also follow us on your favorite audio platforms. Make sure to leave a nice 5-star review if you are so inclined. We love to hear the feedback, and we appreciate you tuning in wherever you listen to Locked On NHL. You can find all of our shows and our full panel of hosts throughout the week right here at Locked On NHL. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.